Hi, welcome to Portage County Matters. I'm Patty Dreier, Portage County Executive. It's great to have you with us. My guests today are from the Department of Emergency Management here in Portage County, a really important mission that will be interacting in the lives of all of us here on a daily basis, one way or another. And I can't wait to get to the show. There's just one quick note at the top, and I'd like to highlight a little bit about the salary study that's going on in Portage County government. You might have heard this in the news, a little bit about how we are having a salary study and working through the process of determining how to go forward with the results of that study. We're in process now. We've hired McGrath as our consultant to help us through it. We're in a process of trying to align the needs with our budget and our vision for the future. What we understand from the salary study is that about 40% of Portage County employees are underpaid, and what we're trying to do in accordance with strategic goal number 4 on our master strategic plan is to ensure that we're providing an opportunity for competitive salaries to attract and retain qualified professionals to conduct the Portage County mission. And that's a mission that crosses all of our departments. Really, by the end of the day here, I'm not sure how it'll all shake out, but what I'm striving for is a fair process and an inclusive process where we end up with a result that we're looking for that really does, at the end of the day, attract and retain the professionals that it takes to do these important jobs. Many of the jobs in county government are ones that require different educational experience, such as emergency management, but other ones are jobs that are on duty 24/7, 365, and so they need to be appropriately compensated in order to keep the mission rolling forward here in our county. From my perspective, if county government is working well, it means that you don't necessarily think about it very much as a citizen, a general citizen. Our community services are provided where they're needed, connections are made where they need to be made, roads are safe, people are safe, and we have a solid process for us to work through if we have an interest or a dream in building a home or in achieving some kind of justice through our justice system. So we put all of these things together, and there are all these different linkages to county government. And again, the salary study will set us forward in developing a new template, more streamlined system, merging multiple pay schedules together into one. And we're looking not only at the salary ultimately, but we're looking at our full benefits package, for all of it goes together to create the right kind of scenario to ensure that there's appropriate compensation for a job well done. So thank you for that few minutes on the news note at the top of the show. What I'd like to do now is to turn our attention to greeting Matthew Dykstra and Bert Nitzke. Matthew and Bert are members of the Emergency Management Department in Portage County. Matthew is the director and Bert is our deputy director, and I'd say welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So Matthew, let's start with you. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself as Director of Emergency Management? And then I'll ask Bert the same, and then we'll talk about what else, what Emergency Management Department does on a daily basis for the people of this county.
All right. I'm a graduate of Mosney High School, so just to the north of here. Upon graduating, I entered the Air Force. In the Air Force, I worked as a firefighter. Did that for a long time, 6 years active duty. Traveled the world, went over to Iraq, over to Kuwait, did some multiple tours over there. When I came back then, I went to school at UW-Wisconsin, Stevens Point, for political science international studies. I thought that'd be a really good thing to go for. I enjoyed my time when I was overseas and everything, so it was really appealing to me. Then I kind of found I wanted to go back into public service. So I transferred over to Oshkosh for their program in fire and emergency response management. From that, I stayed in the fire department, went down to Florida, worked for the federal government down in Florida for a while. And actually, through the whole time, I stayed in the Air National Guard. So I have just under 16 years in the military. still in the Guard out of Madison, Truax Field. So down in Florida, again, you know, I was really concentrated on firefighting, and kind of found the career of emergency management, kind of a really budding and emerging field, and thought that'd be a really great way for me to stay within public service, but then kind of expand, you know, some of my knowledge and everything, and was very lucky to have the opening here, and here I am.
There you are, Matthew Dykstra, Director of Emergency Management here in Portage County Government. Welcome, welcome, and thank you. All of your service beyond all of the years that some of us could grasp, really, and to know that you're pulling it all together in this emerging field of emergency management. And honestly, it's just a funny thing to almost say the play on words, but really, truly, this is one of the most changing fields in county government that I've noticed. So, welcome. Bert Nitzke, you are our relatively new Deputy Director. Tell us about yourself.
Sure. I actually started with Portage County here in early December of 2015. I currently reside with my family up in the Wausau area outside of our mountain. And I'm active on the fire department. Been in fire and EMS for about 17 years. Also worked in the telecommunications field in the side of law enforcement as well for quite a few years, about 6 or 7 years in that. A lot of experience in emergency management in the fields, more of in the instruction side of it. I've taught for many years incident command systems to fire chiefs, police chiefs, elected officials, people in those realms. Also, I've worked with the state emergency management, was on the state incident management team, responded to multiple natural disasters throughout the state, the Capitol protests in the state Capitol. So multiple different experiences with that as well. So just excited to be the new deputy director here in Portage County.
Wonderful. In emergency management, one of the things that I've come to learn about it in my 5.5, a little bit more than that, years in county leadership is that it's about the bringing together of many different professionals and fields into an operational response or preparedness that makes a difference in critical times of need. And I would say that one of the coolest things I told Matthew about your new team in emergency management, Bert, you wouldn't maybe have heard this, is that you each complement the other's strengths so well. It's very exciting, and I think this show is going to give people who are listening or watching on television the opportunity to really understand a lot more about the depths of emergency management. So let's go there. Matthew, tell us about what the department does.
Yep, and you make a really good point there in complementing each other and everything. With our department, you know, we don't really have a lot of toys and resources that you might see with other entities. So really what we really rely upon is those relationships that we have with other entities, and then making sure that we do complement each other correctly. So while you know, Bert might be responding to one thing and I might be responding to another, to make sure that we're both keeping each other in mind, to make sure that we're all working together towards a common goal, so that law enforcement is on the same page with fire, is on the same page with EMS, emergency medical services, our public health entities, all of our public partners as well, our small businesses, our large businesses, to make sure that when we have like a natural disaster or any type of disaster for that matter, that we're not all fighting for the same resources, that we're on the same page and that we're working together for a common good.
Excellent, excellent. My experiences with emergency management as county executive, of course, I'm thinking about straight line winds and I'm thinking about floods. Those are the two big ones. We've had some other smaller instances of need here in Portage County, but these are the two big ones. So when we're talking with citizens about emergency management, talk a little bit about the main messages that you want them to keep in mind when they hear the words emergency management. What's it really all about, and how does it relate to them?
Yep. So realistically, what emergency management is what we intend to do is we look at what emergencies we have here. We accomplish what we call a hazard threat analysis or hazard vulnerability analysis. So we look at the history of what events have occurred here. Obviously, we have tornadoes or straight line winds, our flooding scenarios. We also look at extreme weather in regards to like winter weather, cold weather emergencies. We are a little bit more resilient up here in northern Wisconsin than other areas, but we still look at those. And then we look at what our hazards are. Once we have that, then we look and we say, well, what do we have for resources to address those types of hazards? So we gather all those, not just internally throughout the county and through the different municipalities, but again, also working with our public entities as well, our private industry as well. And then we look at that, and we say, well, we have these issues, we have this to address it, where are our gaps, and then how do we fill those gaps? So that's really what we do in emergency management, is to look at what could happen, what do we have to do, to address that, and what we need outside of that to help out. Through that, there's 4 different phases in emergency management. So we look at both preparation, preparedness. So we try to develop the different outreach, make sure that we have everything, all of our plans ready. We look at the response to those specific emergencies, taking those resources that we've developed, and then putting it towards that emergency. We then try to recover from the emergency, bring us back to where we were before the emergency happened, and then finally we look to mitigate. Some of those mitigation, what that would be, I guess, different from recovery, is not only bringing us back to where we were before, but then making sure that we're lessening the impacts for future types of disasters.
Trying to prevent future ones. And I like your analogy that you've often used about a cell phone.
Correct, yeah. So with cell phones, a recovery would be if you were to drop your cell phone and break it on the ground. Recovery would be bringing your cell phone in to be repaired, and it's exactly the way it was before you dropped it. Mitigation then would be, okay, instead of just bringing it back to where it was before, would be like adding perhaps like a cover to your cell phone so that when you do drop it the next time, the damage is less significant. So that's really what we intend to do in our office, is both prepare people for the inevitable, some things that just happen.
Like tornadoes or bad weather or
Correct.
Power outages and so on.
Yep, some of it we can't prevent, and we know that. And we try to make it so that we're more prepared for it and that the impacts are less than they normally would be.
Thank you. Bert, you've done a lot of training, as you had mentioned, when you were working for the technical college, and in the whole field of emergency management. I mean, train would be or training is about the real way that we get ourselves to this next level of preparedness. We test it out. We see how we're doing. We do tabletop exercises and whatever. Will you talk about that just a little bit? What are the kinds of training? And then that kind of gives us a kind of a broader spectrum. Then we're going to come back to some of the other content again.
Yeah, definitely. The training portion of it is huge, not just for the public to be prepared for natural disasters, man-made disasters, and incidents that occur in the field, but for the responders to be prepared as well. And that's just as well as the sheriff's deputies, the police officers, the firefighters, the EMTs, the elected officials, city public works folks, everybody that would respond to a incident or a disaster, they need to be prepared and trained as well. And so one of the things that we're looking at doing and doing here in Portage County is creating additional classes for that instruction to those responders that are going to be responding to those types of incidents. And besides having internal folks train those people, or have external entities as well coming in to do some of that training, that gives a different perspective of what is out there for the training. And some examples of that is incident command courses, how to prepare, not just prepare for the incident, but when the incident happens, how do you take command of it? Who is in charge of things? And what funnels do they need to go through? Also looking at different trainings with our Emergency Operations Center, which is a key component within the county to funnel information not just to the public, but to other entities, even up to the statewide resources that may need to come into Portage County off of that. So a big part of that is to train people on how to work those avenues and making sure that they're efficient in those avenues.
Matthew, when we're when we're out doing outreach in Portage County. We've got our 27 municipalities, and one of the things that I'm really proud of is the way that you are so often there at our Towns Association in the county. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it ties nicely with what Bert was just talking about in relation to emergency preparedness and training.
Yeah, and going back again to how we started off is building those relationships. If we don't build those relationships before something happens, a common, I guess, almost becoming cliche now in the emergency management world is the term that, you know, the time of emergency is not the time to be exchanging business cards.
Oh, interesting.
So one thing we try to do again is establish those relationships beforehand, so that when something does happen, that we're familiar with each other, that we know each other's first names, and we know what concerns are as well. So I do attend a lot of the different Towns Association meetings. I work a lot with the different entities. One of the issues that a lot of people are aware of is the things with the rail industry. So that was a concern the last couple of years in regards to, you know, the blockages of different thoroughfares and things. So I know that's definitely an issue out in Amherst Junction, out in Junction City. That, you know, we've tried to work with those individuals as well to really address the needs of all the citizens of Portage County.
And you've been involved lately. You actually helped to connect some military training that was destined to take place someplace in Portage County with other training needs that we had. Why don't you talk about that? That was fabulous.
So many may not realize that we have a Army Reserve unit up in Junction City. With that reserve unit, there is actually a active component. So there's some individuals that are Army Reserve, but they're on active orders. So they are currently stationed up in Junction City, and they have a tremendous capability in a chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear response.
Wow, right here in Portage County. Think
Correct.
about it, everybody.
Yeah. And you know, they're up there, they do all this training, and they really wanted to work with the local responders. And they have their needs too, in regards to exercising and such, as Bert brought up. And so we have this opportunity now that we're developing different types of training events with them. We did have a exercise out at the airport in regards to a accidental release of chemical event out there.
Right here at Stevens Point Airport.
At the Stevens Point Airport. And one thing that we're working towards now is a sequence of exercises, both starting at a tabletop exercise, what we call, which is more or less, again, just as it sounds, getting all the different entities at a table and talking through a type of event and what we would do. That's now going towards a functional exercise where we can get more of our hands into the actual events and how they would occur, and moving towards a full-scale exercise, which we'll have in June, the beginning of June. Again, at University of Wisconsin Stevens Point. So we're getting all those different groups together, all the stakeholders together that can participate and kind of understand, you know, what each other do, what our responsibilities and what our roles are, and exchanging those business cards again before an actual event were to happen. So
some of the things that I recall doing here as county executive is we had a tabletop exercise. This one was done in Marathon County, but it was a multi-county effort. It was running through the scenarios related to what if the dam at Lake Dubay failed. How much water, where would it go, what other things do we need to think about? We learned about the range of the water. You know, where I sit here today knowing right where the range of water will go, and that we would need to find alternatives for various kinds of services that are in the path of that rising water. So it was fascinating. And we had leaders from Marathon County government, from our county government, from all different responder and utility kinds of players, and it really was a valuable effort. And I mean, there's a lot of effort that goes into each one of these training experiences in order to really get the greatest value out of them. And so I know that you help to make those things possible for us, but you also call on other resources, state or federal resources, to bring them in and help us be more trained and ready.
Yeah, and that brings up another point too. Again, talking about some of the private industry that we work with. You know, recently, just last year, we had an exercise with Coke Pipeline and Flint Hills Resources to involve like how we would respond to a potential release within the Wisconsin River of any type of petroleum-based products. So again, we worked with them, and we're actually having an after-action meeting with them as well to go over kind of, again, go over what happened and what we can do to address some type of a scenario like that.
So for anybody that just tuned in to Portage County Matters or the radio station here in the city of Stevens Point, I've got Matthew Dykstra, our Director of Emergency Management, and I've got Bert Nitzke. He's our Deputy Director of Emergency Management, and we're talking about the mission of emergency management in Portage County, what we're working on, and how we continue to move that forward on a daily basis for the people of this county. Let's talk about where you get funding from and how you relate to state resources. It's often that I have the opportunity to meet with our state Wisconsin emergency management personnel that come and oversee our county's operations, make sure that they're telling elected leaders such as myself, county leaders, how we're doing, and we're doing very well, thank you very much. But I want everybody else to understand that funding stream and also how the federal requirements for EPCRA, you can define that for everybody, how that all fits into the picture with our daily mission.
Yeah, I'll start off with that. So, you know, another common term that we use or phrase in emergency management is all disasters start and end locally. And that's the same as the structure happens with us in the state of Wisconsin is, and we start locally here. We're statutorily required to have an emergency management office, and so we do so. For that, then we do report up to the state, and then the state up to the FEMA region, and the FEMA region up to the federal government. And for that, we do have certain requirements in grant funding. Our office, not just wages, salary, and fringe, and all of our equipment, our whole program together is relatively paid for 50% through two grants, one of which is Emergency Management Performance Grant, and one of which is EPCRA, which I'll let Bert describe in a minute. So with that, again, we have different requirements that we provide to the state, and such as planning, and the outreach, and
Basically
a lot of the other
products. You prove that you've done the work.
Correct. So there's a lot of other things that we have to provide these different products to show that we are providing a robust emergency management program.
Nice.
So,
Bert,
Yeah.
talk about EPCRA.
Yeah, and EPCRA, that's really our emergency planning community
Right to know.
Right to Know Act. And really what that is that it helps us as a county to identify where our hazards are in the county, specifically to like hazardous materials, large quantities of hazardous materials.
Like hydrochloric acid, for example.
Sure,
Where would it be
exactly.
found in our county? That would be stuff you would have on inventory.
Exactly, and then and one of the parts of that description is to do an off-site visit to them. As emergency management, visiting those facilities, looking at are they following the procedures, are the reporting procedures or correctly, making sure kind of painting the what-if picture. If something were to happen, how do we plan for it? Who's affected by if there was a spill at that incident or that facility? Who responds to it? How do they respond to it? We also have a component called the LEPC, the Local Emergency Planning Committee, that also is a group of stakeholders within the community and elected officials that we reach out to talk about those facilities. And we meet on every couple months on that just to kind of put everyone together on the same page, so that way they're aware of what the facilities are, what their capabilities are, and what the what-if situations. And a lot of those facilities we also play in within our exercise planning as well, to put those key resources within those plans for exercises, because if something were to happen, we again want to be prepared ahead of time versus coming up afterwards.
So certain quantities over a certain threshold, that's when they have to report. If I'm using my hydrochloric acid example. I think that's just such an interesting program. So a lot of folks may not understand that we're not working with just homes of individuals or just other law enforcement organizations or emergency organizations, but we're working with businesses. We're helping businesses be ready too. For the faster we get them back on their feet, then we can recover fully as a community, and that's just critical in the event that there was a larger scale disaster. And yet we're working to keep people safe too. So let's talk about the resources that emergency management has available to the people of our county. How do we want them to be prepared, and where can they get information?
Yeah, and I guess, and this is one way that the federal government addresses it, is you should first be informed, and then to make a plan, and then to build a kit. And so starting off with being informed, we have multiple resources for that. First and foremost, you can always make sure that you pay attention to your local news station, your radio station, television. You can get a weather radio. Those can be purchased for anywhere from $20 on up, depending on what you want. Really great resource to have in anyone's home. Outside of that too, we also invest in a system that we call Portage County Community Alerts. So with that, you can register if you go on the Sheriff's Department website or the county website.
The county homepage,
you can sign up for that. And what that does is it provides, we can either send messages through your cell phone. We can also push messages through the radio, through the television, like the streaming things that go on the bottom of a television. And with that, in regards to like flooding or any of the other types of disasters, or even like with we're talking about with EPCRA, with hazardous materials, is we can plot different types of things on a map and then contact people specifically within that area. Mm-hmm. One thing I would like to talk about with that too is sometimes some people may get upset that you might get a phone call in the middle of the night for rising waters, or that there's an individual who's lost, and we're looking for that person. Again, we understand that it's not always convenient to get those phone calls in the middle of the night, but I really want to stress the fact that it's a very important system, and that if you opt out of that, you're losing some of that ability to get some of those calls in the time that you might need it, or the time when your son or grandfather is lost. So just want to reach out with that.
We've got about 3 minutes left in the show or so, and I just want to make sure that we also offer people what the name of the website is, that they can get some information. Let's go there.
Yeah, ready.gov in regards
Ready.gov.
to Ready.gov can provide a lot of the information, can help with those other two items in making a plan and then building a kit. And then also anytime that you'd want to reach out to our office, we're more than willing, more than happy to help out with that. So whether you're a school, a charter school, or a church, any private, public entity, we're willing to help. So. And
I even just look at your schedule for this week. You'll be out speaking to an elementary school and out connecting with others on one of the follows up to an exercise, connecting through some of these other committees on doing after action reports that are needed as part of satisfying all of our different requirements to stay abreast of the field and what it's going to take for us to be ready to work for the people should the need come today or tomorrow, right?
Exactly.
Now, one of the other things that people may not be aware of is that we do some special emergency preparedness things for people who are seniors or homebound individuals. For example, when we had that cold snap recently, on the other storms, we were watching the weather come in related to the big snowstorm recently. And one of the things that we did is we made sure that we delivered an additional meal for our homebound population, so that if we couldn't get to deliver that meal tomorrow, that they would have another meal to nourish them. And so again, we work with our Aging and Disability Resource Center, we work with public health, we work with you in emergency management, work with law enforcement and EMS and so on. And I think that is the beauty of all of this. Nobody's the single expert in any of it. That you all help us bring together our expertise into sort of a hub and a plan and a real strategy to move forward. Yeah. So what else would you like to do as we wrap up here? What message would you like to leave the people of Portage County? Remembering that this station is one of the stations that people can get additional emergency information, especially 105.9 WSNP, the radio station on which some people are listening to Portage County Matters. This station is one that will be important in future emergencies, so it'll be our way to communicate with people. We don't have to worry about opening a radio station in the middle of the the night, as I remember trying in our first floods that I had here. Yeah, go
I
ahead, Matthew.
guess the biggest message for me, and this is one that the federal government has also used recently in regards to response to any type of issue that you might see out there, is if you see something, say something. And really, again, we work for the public, we work for the county and all the constituents. So if there's anything that you see that you think we may need to address or that we might not know about, or any help that you may need, again, feel free to contact us. So.
And we will. Thank you so much, Emergency Management Department. Matthew Dykstra, our Director, and Bert Nitzke, our Deputy Director. We'll see you next time on Portage County Matters. Thanks for joining us.